Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. You know, it's great to have with us today Scott Summerville, who recently retired as the president and CEO of Mitsubishi Electric Automation out of Chicago, Illinois. Scott is a longtime industrial automation industry leader. He's been in the business for 30 years. He's done some tremendous things all around the world with his leadership. He spent most of his career at Rockwell Automation, working up through various positions in the Asia Pacific region. Was president of that operation from 2003 to 2008. Scott's a member of the executive roundtable within the material handling industry, former member of the board of governors of the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, as well as a contributing author to the Northwestern University Kellogg-sponsored book, Leadership Experiences in Asia. He served on the boards of Mitsubishi Electric Iconics and Digital Solutions. He was on the board of Mitsubishi Electric Foundation. He's still on the board of Miami University Foundation, Aspertech, another nonprofit, and the Japan America Society in Chicago. He's participated in panels of the World Economic Forum in Seoul and Beijing. Scott has a long and storied career. He's on the Dean's Advisory Board for the College of Engineering and Computing at Miami University. A wealth of experience, a long career. Can't believe you're thinking about retiring and just working on boards, Scott, but welcome to the program.
Hey, Wayne, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be great for our audience to hear from you with that breadth of experience over a number of years. And it's always a blessing to let the stories of real life kind of hit us, with someone with your experience and background. So tell us about industrial automation. Tell us a little bit about Mitsubishi Electric if you'd like, because you were there most recently. But as you're moving out, this whole area of industrial automation is
hmm
probably a black box to a lot of folks
Yeah.
who might be listening to the program.
Well, first of all, I got to tell you, I love industrial automation. I've been in it for 35, or I was in it for 35 plus years.
Mhm.
You get to see how things are made. And in any market vertical, any industry vertical, whether it's cars,
Mhm.
automotive, which you spent your career in, but it could be food and beverage or could be wastewater, not even how things are made, but how things are cleaned.
Mhm.
So I found it extremely fascinating. It's not a rapidly moving industry like consumer products, like, smartphones or whatever. A little bit more deliberate. I think manufacturers are very concerned about losing control and quality and so on. That's a good thing. So the
Mhm.
technology is a little bit more slow moving uh, and a little bit more deliberate. Recently in automation, it's been pretty sluggish over the last several years, and I think this is driven by an incredible ramp up in demand after COVID,
Yeah.
and then the supply chain crisis, the ensuing supply chain crisis, and so on. People dialed it back, and now there's a lot of market uncertainty, which you can imagine because of world events,
Mhm.
tariffs, whatever. So investment's not at the level that it had been. But I expect automation is it's necessary, particularly because of the birth rate in not only this country, but globally, Japan, Mexico, et cetera.
Mhm.
It's really fallen off the table. You've probably read articles on that. And automation is going to be a necessity. There's not enough people to man all the jobs that are going to be required in manufacturing. So companies are going to have to automate. A little bit of a respite here due to demand, but it will, the trajectory will start to increase for sure.
That's an amazing revelation, I think, because there's a lot of discussion now about the disintermediation of jobs because of AI, but the birth rates are very low in many parts of the world, and so to realize we're not going to have the people to actually do the jobs that are going to be necessary to produce the goods and services that we need to produce. And so automation is not going to become something that's nice or that drives efficiency. It's going to become essential. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And I think another thing that companies need to look at is employing individuals that are in underserved communities right now, specifically in the area of autism. You know, the number of autistic births is about 1 in 33, which
Hmm.
is really incredible when you compare it to other disabilities like Down syndrome and so on. But
Hmm.
and many of those with autism, they're socially awkward, but they're very high functioning, and many go to
Absolutely.
college, they get engineering degrees and so on. So, but I think corporate America, they know it's the right thing to do. They just don't understand how good it is for business. And when we get to that point, and it, again, to your point, will become a necessity, I think it will change that entire dynamic.
Yeah, and as we go back to industrial automation, just so the audience has a perspective on that. So we're talking everything from robotics to sensing equipment to perceive what's happening, then the feedback loop of that data getting back into systems which can control and manage processes, maybe refine quality in real time. We're talking about transfer systems, conveyors.
Yeah.
I mean, even things like the belts at the airport that manage luggage and transfer luggage and all those kinds of things. So
Yep.
industrial automation is a whole series of everything from cameras and scanners and databases and computer control and AI integration and robotics. I mean, it's a big field that you're talking about here.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And of course, you came from the car industry.
Yeah.
And the automotive industry is one of the most automated industries in the world. Stamping presses to make, body
Yeah.
parts,
Sure.
paint shops, body and assembly, where you're putting the vehicle together.
Mm-hmm.
Robotic welding. You mentioned robotics.
Yeah.
Just powertrain, assembling the engine. Of
Yeah.
course, EV production is much different. But
Mhm.
really, anytime something is moving on a production line, that
Mhm.
requires automation, of course. And automation is typically, we've used programmable controllers. You're probably familiar with those. They're essentially plant floor computers. The
Right.
difference being that they're highly deterministic because, again, manufacturers want to know that, and for
Yeah.
safety reasons and so on, that something's going to happen at the exact time that they need it to happen. And that's why
Mhm.
determinism is so important. But yeah, the degree, and I think what's interesting, Wayne, is I've heard that if you look at all the manufacturing entities in the United States,
Mhm.
90% are unautomated. So they still have a lot of manual processes. Maybe you mentioned
Mhm.
transfer lines. Maybe they're transferring production from one machine to another
Yeah.
manually. So there's a tremendous upside opportunity in automation. But a lot of the reasons why people are not just going gung ho into this, particularly smaller manufacturers, is the cost.
Yeah.
The entry cost can be prohibitive. The risk is there. What if it doesn't work out? What if the ROI
Mhm.
is not there? So it's really incumbent on companies, and I think AI will play a role in this to make
Sure.
automation more appealing and less risky for smaller mid-market
Yeah.
manufacturers.
Yeah, and early, I mean, you mentioned just now the ROI risk. So how many years of payback would it take? Is it actually producing a return in the first place? But earlier you mentioned the impact on quality as well. I mean, you would think that if you can automate things and you could take out human error, you would necessarily move to better quality. But sometimes the sophistication of the sensing equipment and the automation itself might not be able to do as good a job as what human eyes and judgment could do in some cases. So there's a whole realm of risks that are part of it. So I'm glad you're bringing that to our attention.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think good point. But I do think automation. Let's take cameras, for instance. You mentioned that. I think if the application is done well, In today's day and age, you can
Mhm.
almost do anything better than a human eye. Maybe some organic material. I know 10 years ago, if you're trying to determine which piece of fruit is still good and which is too ripe versus not ripe
Yeah,
enough, that was a
yeah.
challenge for machine vision. I think to a large extent, technology has conquered that now. So I would say that, gee, the lion's share of applications can be done by automation to improve quality, do it better than humans. And also, there's the safety aspect, whether it's automotive manufacturing or steel. There's a lot of
Mhm.
applications that are inherently risky, in terms of safety. And I think automation mitigates that quite a bit as well.
Yeah, or too demanding for physical work as well. Yeah,
Right.
just a quick story. I started putting number eight piston in the 74 model Cadillac engines in 1974 or 1973, put it in the 74 models. And one night after I'd completed my second shift work, I got asked to work a third shift as a double. And I was 18, so working a double
Mm,
was great. I get 8 hours of overtime. But what
hmm
had happened is on an adjacent line, there was a machining process that was going on for intake manifolds. And I
mm,
don't know if people really know what an intake manifold is, but imagine a piece of cast iron that's about this long and about this wide and about this thick, and it weighs like between 60 and 70 pounds. And what had happened is there was a transfer robot that would take it off of a line and then
hmm
kind of lock it into another machine that would rotate,
hmm
and then you'd have to take one out and put it on another line. And so
hmm
this process of loading and unloading this machine for 8 hours, and I was 18 and pretty strong. It was just
Yeah.
like undoable. I thought,
Right.
what have I got myself into? But you don't even realize that there are all kinds of heavy jobs and
Sure.
dangerous jobs, by the way, as
Yep.
well, that even back in the 1970s were being done by
Yeah.
robots, basically.
It's interesting you should bring that up, Wayne, because machine tending is a huge application right now. So
Mhm.
those parts would now be loaded by a robot into the
Mhm.
machine tool.
Yeah.
And there's something called DRC, direct robot control. So you can actually have the machine tool communicating with the robot, vice versa. So the door will open, the part will be
Mhm.
loaded, unloaded. So yes,
Mhm.
it's a safety issue, it's ergonomics. It's also just cost, because in a lot of cases, the machine needs to machine the part, and that may take several minutes, and you've got a worker standing there waiting for it to be done in a lot of cases. It's
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
extremely inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, as you move on to your next thing, what's next on the horizon for you? Just curious before we move on to the rest of the program.
Well, I think there's two tacks I want to take. One is health and wellness. I've
Hmm.
always exercised, worked out, tried to stay in shape, but we were talking before the broadcast, the travel, it wears your body down, right? And I was doing a lot of
Absolutely.
international travel to Japan, China, other faraway points from where I live, and it does take a toll on you. And maybe the jet lag more than the actual travel, quite
Yeah, too.
frankly.
Yeah.
And people think, well, the more you travel, you're going to get used to jet lag. No, it doesn't work that way. So anyway, I want to spend more time on health, exercise, do
Mhm.
more in that area with my
Yeah.
wife. But then the other part is giving back. I think it's so critical that people in our positions that have been successful, that have really been blessed, let's face it,
Mhm.
uh, give back to communities, give back to society, and so on. So I've got several board appointments that fall into that category, and I'm really looking forward to leveraging my organizational experience, my business experience to help them.
Yeah, good for you. That's tremendous. I mean, well, you're giving back today because you're helping all of us learn from some of your experience and story. So let's use that as a transition to the part of the program where we're going to try to find some leadership lessons and a key story
Hmm.
you're going to tell us. So tell us a story, set it up for us, give us enough of the background so we can understand it. It could be a huge home run, or it could be a oh my goodness, we got to fix this somehow story. It doesn't
Right.
really matter. But tell us a story and let's see if you and I can tease
Yeah.
out a few leadership lessons.
Well, first of all, I got to tell you, stories are so critical in leadership, right?
They are.
When you're conveying a message to your employees, your leadership team, if you can tell a story, people remember that. So I really
Mhm.
appreciate the fact that you have this as part of your series. Um, I'm gonna. There's many, obviously, but I'm gonna talk about when COVID occurred, and I'm probably not alone. Maybe many people that do this sort of thing would reference COVID. But at the time, as you can remember, Wayne, quite frankly, we didn't know where we were headed. Society was locked down. We were to stay in our homes. We were all kind of led to believe that, COVID, if you caught it, could be deadly even. Was this the end of civilization as we knew it? I
Right.
mean, at that time, you didn't know. So, I was the leader of our business, and obviously you can't run and hide. One thing that I realized was that we had all our employees, most of them,
Mhm.
were in their homes, sequestered in their homes. And I knew that it was going to be critical to communicate, that we
Mhm.
had to communicate much more so than we had in the past. And I set up with my manager of organizational development, I set up a weekly video to all of our employees talking about the COVID situation and specifically how many cases we had within the organization, how people were doing. Through the whole thing, we had one hospitalization and that person recovered. But fortunately, we had a lot of mild cases and so on. But I was very transparent with the employees, talking to them about the situation. Interestingly enough, that video series continues to this day. Now it's not about COVID. It
Right.
evolved, it morphed. It's now about business results. And it's not weekly, it's monthly. And I would I would again communicate with the entire employee population, tell them about our business results, sometimes not so good, sometimes really good. And I would talk about applications, which customers we were serving. And I think people really found it fascinating that we were, the products they use, the that they purchase, the food, the apples, the pistachios, the cars, the car washes, when they went to
Mhm.
get their car washed. Mitsubishi
Mhm.
Electric has a pretty prominent position in that industry. And they
Mhm.
really got a lot out of it. And I brought it down to their level so everyone could consume it. And
Yeah.
I got, a lot of feedback from our employees. And I just learned, I guess I knew communicating was important prior, but I didn't know how important. And I didn't know exactly what to communicate. And so it was an evolution for me. I had a lot of help organizationally, but I think it was a great thing that we did as a company.
Yeah, I love that story. And it's communication is not given as significant a role in kind of how powerful a leadership tool it is, I think. So I'm really glad that you raised it. And it sounds like you started a level of incremental communication out of a need.
Hmm.
And it was need to pull together and ensure one another that we're all safe. It's going to be okay. We'll come through this. But the
Hmm.
fact that it continues on is really something you identified as a need that the organization needed to know more all the time. So,
Absolutely.
so you now, even though it's just monthly instead of weekly, the fact that business objectives or business metrics are being communicated
Yeah,
is really interesting. Let me ask a question about that
sure.
because one of the things that I always tried to do when I was leading organizations was I tried to go a little bit beyond what the kind of the the communication typical communication level had been,
Hmm.
or maybe even a little bit beyond what my other fellow business unit leaders
Hmm.
were communicating, and it instilled like a level of confidence in the people that they were like a little bit
Hmm.
more special, and that
Hmm.
I trusted them a little bit more. Did you see that, like when you start communicating more regularly with people and giving them things they normally don't see, that they kind of felt like they were more engaged? Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk to me about
absolutely. I think that's a significant part of it. And I would say that the single most important thing you can do from a
that.
communication standpoint, is know people's names.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, if you've got, thousands of employees, 50,000, whatever, you're not going to know everyone's name. But
Yeah.
the people that you pass in the hallway, the people that you interact with on a fairly frequent basis,
Yeah.
and even occasionally, you really should try and know their name. I've gotten tremendous feedback in several cases from people that said, you know my name, you knew my name, and that really
Hmm.
made an impression on me as a business leader. It made an impression on them. So communication in all forms is really key.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's important to know the name of the person who sweeps the floors every day in your office, or the people who are serving you lunch in the cafeteria, the people who are all just other children of God, and treating them all with respect and with kindness, and with just kind of a knowing, just knowing a little bit about them is a tremendous blessing, especially from someone like yourself who had a tremendous amount of authority, and they didn't always get that level of respect from people in your position. So it
Yeah.
was really unique to them, and it made a powerful impression. I think you
Yep.
should have been complimented for that and got a lot of feedback because it was a great
Yeah.
thing you were doing. So going back to this communication. You're saying you started communicating business metrics, or maybe that's still continuing now. Are there other things, did you give like maybe a preview to your team about a forward product launch, or maybe a corporate strategy that's going to be revealed that maybe the wider group didn't know about, or some things of that sort, like a little bit of a advance notice on some of the emerging issues for the company?
Yes, I would try and let people, in addition to talking about, I thought it was very important to tell them who we were serving, because I wanted people to be proud. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about, with Mitsubishi Electric, but it went back to Rockwell and so on as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
wanted people to be proud of what we did. Uh, I'll give you an example. So we sell, Mitsubishi Electric sells computer numerical controls for machine tools, like we were talking about before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those machine tools make automotive parts, as you were mentioning, but they
Mm-hmm.
also make medical devices. They
Sure.
make aerospace, agricultural equipment, parts for agricultural equipment, and so on. And
Yeah.
I thought it was important, particularly around the COVID period and even beyond, that people knew that we were playing a fairly major role indirectly in
Yeah.
making medical devices,
Yeah.
catheters and syringes and pacemakers and things like
Mhm.
that. People had
Yeah.
no idea. Our
Yeah.
employees just knew we were selling technology to machine tool companies, but what those companies were doing with the equipment. So I made that connection, and I think that was very important in building that kind of confidence and feeling that, hey, we're doing something good for society.
Yeah, no, that's really important. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, you're part of a bigger picture. You're actually touching humanity in a positive way because of your role in that chain of activity. So I think that's really great. I think it's a great testimony to the fact that it's still ongoing. That you started something important. You probably didn't know you were starting something so important. You knew it was important. You did it then, but then you probably weren't aware that it was going to become so important as a tool.
Yeah, and we do a newsletter as well.
Hmm.
And hopefully my successor will be carrying forward on all these things. I think he will be, but we do a monthly newsletter.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I would write an article every month, and that's tough. That's tough. You're
Yeah.
traveling, you
Yeah.
got all these
Yeah.
issues you're dealing with. Every month, you have to turn out an article that's meaningful, that's compelling,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
will resonate with employees. I would talk
Hmm.
to them about a variety of subjects and some personal. My wife and I vacationed in Africa about a year ago,
Hmm.
and the place we stayed at was, really focused on sustainability. Well,
Yeah.
automation is about sustainability as well.
Sure.
And so I made the connection there, and I talked about our vacation and where we stayed and so on. And I think people found it really interesting that I would, talk about something so personal as a vacation I went on, but then tie it to the business that we're in.
Yeah, the way you're doing. Yeah,
Yep.
perfect. No, that's great. Well, and you didn't have the benefit of letting Chat GPT write it for you back in the day. So
Well, I
now
tell you, it's
it's
interesting you
harder.
say that because the last 6 months of articles, I would use Microsoft Copilot to get it
Yeah,
started.
you get started, sure. Yeah.
I put the theme in the prompt, and it would
Mm-hmm.
help me kind of lay it out, and then I would tweak it, of course, add the personal element, whatever. But it would be it's helpful, and I could tell you other ways I've used AI, Gen AI, but that was certainly one of them.
Yeah, I could see when you make the transition from doing it without that help and then doing it to with, you could talk about how communication automation is very similar to industrial automation. It's just another tool that you're
There you
using to
go.
get a great
Yeah,
result. I love that. Yeah.
absolutely. Never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
I didn't either till that moment, but I didn't have you and you telling the stories that helped me. So that's great, Scott. Thanks for sharing that, and that's a good lesson to take out of this. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I like to ask a couple of the same questions to each of the guests.
Hmm.
First one is, let's rewind. I guess in your case, we could rewind 40 years or so. What do you know now that you wish you knew back when you were just getting started? What advice would you give yourself if you could give one piece?
Well, I would say, first of all, I've evolved significantly as a business leader, as a person. And I would say I was very driven. I know your podcast is Driven to Lead. Maybe I
Yeah.
was a little too driven. And I would say I would like to have been more self-aware,
Hmm.
and really understand how I'm coming across, how people perceive me, and maybe being a little bit more empathetic. And now with, giving back what I plan on doing here going forward, again, it's quite different from what I was when I was 25, 30 years old. But having said that, I think everyone goes through this evolution
Sure.
as a person, as a
Absolutely.
business leader. I'm not sure there's any way you can start like that. You've almost got to go through the evolution to evolve, right? To be the person you end up becoming.
You do.
But
Absolutely.
anyway, I think what I tell, I had the privilege of speaking to some students at Northwestern University Kellogg School
Mhm.
about a week ago, and I was asked a very similar question, and I said, self-awareness.
Yeah.
I was always intellectually curious, and that's the other thing I tell people, young people, I think is very important. But I said, make sure you develop a strong degree of self-awareness.
That's a great answer, and it's really interesting because as a executive coach, the second thing, not the very first thing, but the second thing after we just get to know each other and kind of have a plan for where we're moving with a coaching assignment, the next thing, the most important fundamental element is self-awareness, and we all can be more self-aware all the time. And it takes a tremendous amount of effort to first of all have the desire to do it, and then to have some help in looking for those blind spots and for those areas
Hmm.
where we really can determine what serves us and what does not,
Yep.
right? And
Right.
work on the does nots, but becoming aware of it. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great answer, and the
Yeah.
more we can be self-aware, is going to be
Well,
the
if I could
foundation.
just add, Wayne, I think the great thing is when self-awareness manifests itself in your leadership capabilities and so on. For
Yeah.
me, uh, one of the things that I think is really important is to encourage dissent or
Hmm.
different opinions, if you will,
Make
in
it
a
a safe
meeting.
space anyway. Yeah.
Right, create that psychologically safe space and
Yeah.
disagree with me. I don't want people
Sure.
disagreeing because they're doing political grandstanding and so on,
Right.
and you can you
Right.
can tell. But
Of course.
I do want people to feel safe in terms of disagreeing
Of
with
course.
me if they feel strongly about something, and that's what self-awareness is, what that
Yeah.
generates.
Yeah. I always wanted that, but I think as a younger man, sometimes I was making my point so forcefully, I didn't really leave the room for people to feel comfortable to dissent.
Me too.
Later on,
And
later on.
I can imagine you doing that, Wayne.
Thanks, I think. So, all right, let's fast forward the other direction now.
Okay.
So you and I are sitting at a cool pizzeria somewhere in Chicago there, and we're having a beer and a slice, and we're talking about our lives, our careers. What do you be telling me you're most proud of?
Well, first of all, please do come to Chicago and we'll have that. It's right around the corner and it's a great place, Pequod's. But anyway, I'm
Love
going to
it.
hold you to that.
All right, we'll
Um,
do.
you know, I think what I'm most proud of is when students and employees say that you've changed my life because you've taught me how to do these things, and I'm going to
Mhm.
take that with me forever, and I'm going to build upon that, and I'm going to do good with it. And retiring in any way you want to put it is an interesting situation. It's got its pluses and minuses, and you can talk to my wife for some of the minuses, but uh,
Already.
well, it's an adjustment, right? So, but in terms of um, it brings out a lot of comments from people that are heartfelt about the impact you've made on their lives. And for me, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And there's been, and not just people saying, "Hey, thanks, you were great," but going into specifics and telling a story, like we were talking
Yes.
about earlier, about exactly what impression you made on them at what time, and then it's sincere.
Yeah.
But that's what it's all about is can I help others? There's a great quote, and I forget who it's from. The quote was, "The purpose of life is to help others get through it." And I
Mm.
totally get that, and I believe that because you
Yeah.
can't take stuff with you. The only thing you can leave is what other people take from you. So anyway, that's it for me.
That's a theme that occurs quite often. It's something that was really powerful recognition that I had when I left my corporate career, because when I did, although the projects we brought in on time and on budget were important, the money we made for the company, the winning in the marketplace, the market share, all that stuff was good. I love to win, as long as it's not at someone else's expense directly,
Hmm.
right? But
Hmm.
what became very aware to me is exactly what you said, Scott, and that is that the people I touched along the way, and the people that touched me in a positive way, were the things that really matter. I often say this on this program when we talk about this issue. The trophies that I won along the way are in the garage because my wife won't let me bring them in the house. And I actually was okay. I told her, I said, it's okay to just pitch them. We don't even have to, oh, you keep them in the
Yeah.
garage. Okay,
Yeah.
dear. But honestly, to me, the phone calls that I get from someone I worked
Mm,
with a few years ago, or the follow-ups, and then having a conversation about those real world situations, as you mentioned,
yep.
that kind of prove to us, okay, we did make a difference in the world.
Yep.
And we can continue to do that, because I like to say it this way: the purpose of life is to know God and to help other people to know God.
Mm,
But a good part of that journey, at least in my belief system, is being gentle and kind and supportive and loving and empathetic, and helping people to get where they need to go.
yep.
And boy, if we can be blessed enough to have the opportunity to do that, Scott, like you've done throughout your career, then it's a pretty good life.
Thank you, Wayne. I totally agree. And that's what makes the difference.
It really does. Well, it's great to have you on the program today, not only for the great breadth of global experience that you've had, but also for your perspective and your mindset and the insights that you've shared. So, thanks very much for that. If people wanted to get in touch with you and say hello or find out what's going on, how would they do that?
My email address that I use kind of for personal business is slsummer, SUMMER, at yahoo.com.
Okay, we've got that up on the screen, so people will be able to reach out. So don't be surprised if people don't, because I think they're going to find that you're just a great soul that they want to connect with. And I certainly would love to stay in touch with you as well. Have that slice of pizza someday. Thanks again for being on the program, and wish you continued success in whatever you decide to do, Scott.
Wayne, same to you. And thanks so much for having me. It's been truly a great experience with you.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember, the high road leads to a better place.